So at the end of this decade, looking back on some of the transfers that Championship clubs have made over the last 10 years, there have been some absolutely appalling transfers. In today's video, we'll be going through the Championship and going over who has been each club's worst signing over the last 10 years. And before we do get into anything, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. As always, their link will be in the top link of the description down below. Now, we do have quite a bit of midweek action going on in the Championship, so you can hop over to the OneFootball app and keep up to date with everything that is going on. Obviously, we've got the games going on tonight on Tuesday and tomorrow on Wednesday as well. It's a handy little app to have to keep up to date with everything, all the transfer rumours, of course, with the January transfer window coming up as well. So a handy one, like I said, the link will be in the top line of the description down below. But without any further ado, let's get into these transfers. Barnsley Emmanuel Frimpong. What a weird transfer this was. Signing in January 2014, Frimpong only went on to make 8 appearances for Barnsley. On his debut, he was sent off after just 31 minutes against Sheffield Wednesday. And ultimately, with Barnsley being relegated to League One that season, he was released just 4 months later. Just a baffling signing, obviously, a well-known player from his time at Arsenal, but his time in the Championship did not go to plan. Stoke Sadio Berahino. Oh my god. Now, not many will top this one on this list here today, I've got to say. Signing for Stoke in January 2017 for a fee of around about £12 million. He went on to have one of the most ridiculous goal-scoring droughts we've ever seen in English football. 913 days without a goal for Berahino. In his final season at Stoke, he finally managed to hit the back of the net, but ultimately scoring 3 league goals for a fee of £12 million. I mean, this guy got more points than his driving licence than he scored for Stoke during his time there. Shocking signing. Wigan Athletic Andy Delort, after coming over from France with a fairly decent goal-scoring record, he signed for Wigan in the summer of 2014 for a fee of around about £3 million, so not a cheap deal for Wigan, who were in the Championship at the time. The striker went on to make 11 appearances for Wigan, where he failed to score in any of the games, and ultimately ended up being sold the season after. Massive flop. For Huddersfield, that was 50-50 between Diakhaby and Mbenza. Both signings made during their last season in the Premier League. Both have gone on to do absolutely nothing while they've been at the club. I think a collective fee of around about £15 million for both of them, and between them, they've scored 1 goal while at Huddersfield. When I caught a glimpse of Diakhaby, he's looked like Bambi on ice, and the less said about Mbenza, the better, really. Luton Town Danny Spiller signed in the summer of 2012. This came about a time when Luton weren't in a great position financially, and so they needed everyone to really dig in and face the same direction. Danny Spiller looked to be a player who was just there for his final payday, ended up playing 0 minutes for Luton, and was ultimately released at the end of the season. What a waste of everyone's time. Middlesbrough Martin Braithwaite. Now, Middlesbrough over the last 10 years have definitely had players worse than Martin Braithwaite. You know, in terms of a player with talent, he's actually quite up there with some of the players they've had, but in terms of attitude, application, how much they spent on him and what they actually got from him, awful signing from Middlesbrough. In the summer of 2017, they spent about £9 million on Braithwaite, and initially it looked like a really exciting player, but it wasn't so long before he was looking towards the exit door. He kicked up a fuss several times while at Borough. He had 2 loan spells out, and eventually moved back to Spain in 2019. 9 goals he scored for Middlesbrough, so that's £1 million a goal they paid for him. Reading Sonny Aluko. After signing from Fulham after a fairly promising season in the summer of 2017, Aluko came with quite a bit of promise, but struggled in his first season, scoring just 3 times. And considering he came over for a club record fee at the time of £7.5 million, Aluko really failed to deliver. A winger who lacked confidence, end product, or anything basic to his game, really. He's now playing his football out on loan in China. Charlton Athletic Christophe Lapointe. Now, there really was no point of this transfer. He went on to make just 6 appearances for Charlton, described by some Charlton fans as the midfielder who didn't know where midfield was. Although during this spell around 2014, Charlton were making some awful signings, I have to say. Johan Thuram was another name that I saw pop up a lot, not a popular goalkeeper. Derby County Nick Blackman. Now, he was on an absolute hot streak with Reading. He'd scored 13 goals up until January, so Derby thought they'd take a punt on him, spending over £3 million on the player. In the 2 seasons he was at Derby County, he went on to score 1 goal, and that goal being from the penalty spot. While at Derby, he was the definition of useless. He did absolutely nothing during his time there. Millwall Gary Taylor-Fletcher. Now, they signed him on loan back in 2015, eventually going on to get relegated. Obviously, Ian Holloway previously had worked with the guy from his time at Blackpool. A decent striker back in the day, I'm not denying that, but by the time he turned up at Millwall, he looked about 2 stone overweight. He was going grey and he could barely cover 5 yards without getting out of breath. He went on to have 10 appearances for Millwall, scoring 0 goals for them. QPR, now there are too many to mention. They have made some god-awful signings in the last decade. Christopher Samba was one that came to mind when I was coming up with this list. Signed for QPR in January 2013 as they were trying to do anything to avoid relegation. Spending over £12 million on him, it didn't have that effect and they ended up going down. Jose Basinga was another one when you throw into there, he was fined once for refusing to sit on the bench, and he was seen on TV smiling after QPR had been relegated. They made some awful missteps. Birmingham City, another club who have got too many to mention in this video. They've made some serious missteps over the past few years. A couple that spring to mind: Ollie Lee, Hayden Mullins, Tyler Blackett had an awful loan spell back at Birmingham a few years ago. He ended up being a bit of a cult hero in the end, but Chekundoi was an interesting signing, I'll say the least, for Birmingham. Hull City, Hatton Ben Arfa. Now, when this signing was announced on loan in September 2014, Hull fans must have been absolutely buzzing with this one. After looking at how he'd torn the Premier League apart at times with Newcastle, Hull fans must have thought they were in for a treat, but when he turned up at Hull, not looking bothered, he wasn't match fit. After a series of lazy performances, I think that everyone at Hull had just given up on him really, and his loan was ended up cut short and he left in January. Swansea City, Renato Sanchez. Now this one, another loan deal, but what a flop this ended up being for Swansea. He came up with so much potential. People were saying at the time, how have Swansea managed to pull this deal off? After coming up through the Benfica Academy and then signing for Bayern Munich, he was tipped as one of the most upcoming players in world football. His popularity grew after he was probably one of the most overpowered players on FIFA 17. Swansea managed to sign the player, and in the end his highlight reel was probably him passing to an advertising board while he was there. Blackburn Rovers, Leon Best. After signing the striker in July 2012 on a 4-year deal with a massive wage packet for a fee of more than £3 million, how many goals did Leon Best go to score in his 3 seasons at Blackburn? Just the 2. He picked up an injury a few months into his career at Blackburn and from then never went on to really recover from it, and in the end was released by mutual consent in 2015. Disaster of a transfer. Brentford was a bit of a tough one to come up with. I'd certainly say that nowadays Brentford probably have the best recruitment in the Championship, but for their worst signing, I've gone for Chuba Akpom. Believe it or not, there was a lot of hype around this guy back in the day, and he made his first loan spell out from Arsenal, moving to Brentford back in 2013. It took him a while to get into the starting 11, but when he finally did, he went on to make 4 appearances for Brentford, scored in none of those games, and ended up having his loan terminated and cut short fairly swiftly. Cardiff City, Andreas Cornelius. Now this was a weird time in Cardiff's history. It was when they were wearing red as their home kit, but they signed him for, at the time, a club record fee of around about £8 million. A striker coming over from Copenhagen, went on to make 8 appearances for Cardiff and scored no goals. And then in January of that same season, he ended up returning back to Copenhagen, so a waste of everyone's time. It was a weird move. Preston North End, Anthony Elding. Oh my god, this was a dark time for Preston North End. Graham Wesley was in charge. We're in League One, we were struggling for goals, so where do we turn to? We turn to Grimsby Town's 3rd choice striker, Anthony Elding, on loan in January. He came in, and I'm not exaggerating, probably the worst player I've ever seen for Preston North End. And we have had some dross over the last 10 years, especially back in our League One days. He made 5 appearances for us in League One, failed to score, and just looked like a player out of his depth. It looked like we pulled him from a random Sunday League team. Sheffield Wednesday, Alman Abdi. What a waste of time this one was. The player signed for around about £3 million back in 2016. He was at the club for 3 years and made a grand total of 12 starts for them. The guy was constantly injured and I think has to go down as one of Wednesday's worst signings in their history. He scored 1 goal for them, but that £3 million price tag that they paid for him, they're never going to be seeing that again. Nottingham Forest, Rafik Dejabor. He joined Nottingham Forest in January 2014 for a fee of around about £1.5 million. The striker came over with a fairly decent goal scoring record in Greece, but after scoring on his debut for Nottingham Forest, things quickly turned sour for the striker. He was dropped by then caretaker manager Gary Brazil for a lack of effort in training. He'd initially signed on the loan deal, with that becoming permanent at the end of the season. Forest tried to cancel that but couldn't, and eventually in July 2014 his contract was terminated by Forest. Disaster of a transfer. Bristol City, Nicky Hunt. Oh, this guy's career went vastly downhill after leaving Bolton in 2010. He went to sign for Bristol City, made 7 appearances in the 2 years he was there, putting some woeful performances down the line. North End went and signed him after Bristol City, and I have no idea why. I still have nightmares of Nicky Hunt playing at right back today. Fulham, I think you're looking at anyone from that summer transfer window when they were in the Premier League. The one that stands out has to be Surrey. They spent £27 million on this guy. They spent some serious money in that transfer window, and ultimately that completely backfired on them as they looked like a team of strangers out there for the Premier League. Surrey showed him very small glimpses that he could be a decent player for Fulham, but for the majority of times the game was just passing him by. And for £27 million, I mean, Fulham have been ripped off there. Leeds United, Edgar Chani I've gone for, although there's a whole bunch that you could throw into this one. During 2015, I think it's fair to say that Leeds weren't at their peak of their powers, and they made some dreadful deals. This guy, being a striker, went on to play 4 matches for Leeds while on loan, failed to score, but was infamously part of that Sick Note 6, a group of 6 players who controversially pulled out before a game that Leeds had against Charlton that they went on to lose. But people at the time questioned how much substance there was actually behind those injuries that the players had pulled out with. It was a very strange time for Leeds United. I don't think this guy's going to be fondly remembered. And then finally, West Brom, Nicholas Anelka. Walker. Now, looking at this guy's career, West Brom fans must have been buzzing when they were bringing this guy in. He played for PSG, Arsenal, Real Madrid, Liverpool, Man City, Fenerbahce, Chelsea, and he was making his return to England. But boy, did this one go wrong quickly. I'm sure everyone remembers this, but after scoring his first goal for West Brom, he did an anti-Semitic celebration, ended up getting banned for 5 games by the FA, fined £80,000. West Brom ended up losing their sponsor because of it, and then eventually Nicolas Anelka announced on Twitter that he was leaving West Brom without actually telling the club. Complete mess of a situation, brought a lot of unnecessary bad press onto West Brom. In the end, just a disaster of a transfer. But guys, there you have it. There is every single Championship club and who has been their worst signing of this decade. Do you guys agree with my selections? Let me know in the comments down below. This one took a bunch of research going into it, so a like would be very much appreciated. But apart from that, guys, I will now wrap it up for today's video. So if you did go on to enjoy, make sure you leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Make sure you subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But apart from that, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.